coming to you from deep beneath the murky waters that lie beyond the Lake Erie shoreline. This is the Cleveland Podcast! With Fred the Mud Monster and South Bay Caesar. Find us online at facebook.com/The Cleveland Podcast or email us at theclevelandpodcast@gmail.com. Now, join us as we journey through Northeast Ohio and the city of Cleveland. Hey, Fred.
What's going on, Caesar? You like salad?
Caesar's salad. How you doing?
Oh, feeling a little bit muddy. I actually have a little bit of mud on my shoes right now.
Why?
Well, I was just doing some running out in the fields of Edgewater Park, and I just melt so well into that mud. And
Your reputation as the Mud Monster.
The Mud Booster. I'm always the cream of the crop. I'm always covered in mud.
This is why you have your name, the Mud Monster, is right. Because you always end up muddy.
All the time.
No, and like when you're playing sports.
Oh, yes.
And it's always muddy in Cleveland.
Yes, that's so true.
Especially in the springtime.
It reached peak mud, though, when I got caught in like a 3-foot little hole, and my foot was stuck in it, and I had to pull it all the way out. This thing was just covered from head to toe.
How did that happen?
Oh, this was on on the Bedford field, and we were just playing the ultimate frisbee, and I'm just running. I feel like I've lost like 2 feet. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, what is that? I look down, and I realize my foot is stuck in this hole, and everyone else is playing and throwing the disc, and then one of my teammates was going over and like, oh, what? What is that? Why is your foot stuck in the hole in the mud? And I had to pull it all out, and and a couple other people fell in it too. So I clearly did not make the hole big enough for people to avoid it until we had to throw a little frisbee in the hole, and then everyone just ran around it. That field was just muddy. Oh boy,
it's always so muddy around here. Like in the springtime lasts so long. The winter drags into the spring, and the spring drags into the summer.
It always does.
It's always wet. It's always raining. It's either cold or it's raining.
Yeah, I checked the forecast. You know that's going to be cloudy like 4 or 5 days, and there's going to be a little bit of drizzle in 3 of them.
I left for work the other day.
Uh-huh.
And it was a beautiful day.
Oh, it was a beautiful day?
It's a beautiful morning. Ooh-wah-ooh. Right?
Caesar's not a very good singer. I'm the better singer, right, because I have because of my mud, I have very well-preserved vocal cords.
So I left the house in the morning thinking, oh man, this is such a beautiful day. It's sunshine. It's warm outside. There is no way that it's going to rain by the end of the day. And by 4 o'clock, it was like downpour.
Downpour.
So I don't think you can like predict the weather here in Cleveland.
No, you can't.
So we're a podcast about Cleveland for people who are new to Cleveland.
We're not just about the weather.
About all aspects of Cleveland.
Including the weather.
And this is kind of like our pilot episode. Indeed. And we're going to kind of talk about what we are. We are kind of new to the city ourselves, right?
Relatively, yeah.
Relatively. Almost enough where we've been here long enough to know the city. Not such a long time where we're not exhausted by the city.
Right, no.
It's still new to us. It's still fun.
It's an endless treasure trove,
right,
to delve into.
It's an exciting city to live in. And I've never met anybody who doesn't like living here.
Exactly. So for all those national media people said Cleveland's a bad city, I'm going to keep it PG. Go French toast yourself.
It's a pretty cool city. I mean, there's a lot to experience here. I think one of the major problems when people talk about Cleveland is I think the population's under 400,000 people.
Yeah, I think it's around 323.
So people talk about it like it's a small city, but it's not.
Mm-mm.
Columbus, according to those people, is the biggest city in Ohio, which like 1 million, somewhere around there. Maybe bigger at this point. But Cleveland is much bigger. Cleveland Metro is much bigger than like any other city in Ohio.
Yeah.
And the fact that a lot of people have moved out of the city in the last few years, probably the last, continuously over the last 20, 30, 40 years or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not really a good example of what Cleveland's about.
Absolutely.
It's a major metropolis. I think I looked it up earlier today, and it just depended on what website you looked at. There were maybe 2 million people in Cleveland Metro. And it's a misrepresentation to talk about Cleveland like it's a small city.
No. The metropolitan area is quite large.
Right. But the downside of that is that you kind of have to travel around.
Oh, yeah. Not having a car for me,
right.
I've learned that bus system like the back of my hand.
Right. Fred, the mud monster. Fred Moster.
Yeah, I go on the bus every time on the what's called the RTA, and everyone goes, "Man, why is this bus covered in mud?" And I go, "Sorry."
In the last city that I lived in, I moved to a central location where I could be anywhere within 15 or 20 minutes. I could go to all the events that I wanted to be at. I could even be in the suburbs in 15 or 20 minutes. And I centrally located myself in that city for that purpose. And when you move to this city, if you can get somewhere in 15 or 20 minutes, that's a luxury. It's a very spread out city.
Mm.
And the city of Cleveland itself, downtown is a great place. But I think part of the story of Cleveland is that you have to experience the entire metro area.
In its entirety, and actually, an interesting fact, at one point, Cleveland was about 1 million at one point in time in the middle of the 20th century. And what's fascinating is that you can tell when you enter the city, you see these huge roads, like these ginormous roads. No one knows where they're turning. You know what I'm talking about, right around
5-way lanes. You can tell these things were built for carriages.
Well, not just carriages,
or old school cars.
They were built for trolleys and old school carriages and cars. It was meant for a really big metropolitan city. And Cleveland was that at one point. In fact, an interesting fact about Cleveland, at least one of the suburbs, East Cleveland, it used to be perhaps the richest neighborhood in the entire world. It was the home of John D. Rockefeller and the entire Rockefeller family. And you had other billionaires. And now, because of how the population dynamics have changed, East Cleveland's now one of the most impoverished neighborhoods in this region, probably the most.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty bad. But it shows that Cleveland's changed so much, but even in the tragedy of this city, there's a bunch of beauty behind it. It's very much like a Greek tragedy. There is a sense of just this sense of beauty. It
makes me sad a little bit to when you drive through some of the neighborhoods that used to be great. It's like this used to be a wonderful place, and it's not anymore. And there's a sense of sadness that comes with that.
Right, like the Polish village, or the Slavic village.
Slavic village.
There was
and that wasn't that long ago. I talked when I first moved here. I talked to a woman who said, in the 90s, Slavic village was still a pretty great place to live.
For those who don't know, Slavic village is pretty much
I think she was Romanian.
East Romanian, huh? Where's Slavic village? East 90th, East 79th? Would that be about right?
Right in the middle of the city, but in the immediately south.
Right.
If you travel a few miles south of the city on 77, which is the highway that goes immediately south. Slavic village is just to the left as you're traveling out of the city south.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember a friend and I were traveling after going to a meeting at Cuyahoga Community College, which is the local community college here, with many different branches. Find out at ccc.org. But we're going through, and we see the Slavic village. We're going through, and we're seeing these. We see some of the old buildings, and there's clearly a charm to them. But then across the way, you see this broken down liquor store, and unfortunately, when you have that local liquor store, it kind of begins some sort of process at times. It's just people just trying to just make business, and who can blame them? But it's a sign that there's some sort of degradation. Now, I'm not saying that you have a winery and all of a sudden it's like, oh, the town's going to go down in the cellar. We're all doomed. That's not what's happening. But we know what type of liquor stores, like liquor stores in bad neighborhoods.
The first month that I moved here in August of 2015, and Edgewater Live was happening, and that was before the pavilion existed. Mm-hmm. So I went down there, and I have some allergies to alcohol, things like that. So I have to have really specific things that I drink when I go, when I go to a festival or whatever, or just have any beer whatsoever. So I went down to Edgewater Live, which is a festival that happens every Thursday night in the summer, depending on holidays and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's a pretty cool thing that happens. It's right on the beach, the sun's setting, and there's all this. There's a live band playing. Mm. And so that was one of the first things when I moved to the city. It's oh, I want to go visit this. I want to go hang out here. And I got there, and I looked over, and there was this, there were taco trucks or what do you call them? Food trucks?
Food trucks,
beer trucks, whatever. And I looked, and the beer was pretty expensive, and I moved here because I took a job that was that paid a little bit better. Mm. And I was kind of tight on money at the time, and that's why I moved here in the first place.
Right.
But I got here, and I didn't really have money to blow. So, and I think beers there were $6 or $7.
Oh, geez,
per
that's
beer,
quite a bit.
which is pretty acceptable for a festival type event.
I guess. But yeah, that's still pretty high.
But I walked up to this guy who was there at the Edgewater Live, and I said, "Hey, can you tell me if there's a place close by where I can grab a 6-pack of beer, which honestly is probably not legal. You can't bring outside beer into Edgewater Live. Edgewater Live is really cool now because there's at the time the pavilion didn't exist. But now there's this great pavilion at Edgewater where you can get beers of all sorts. And you can just go up and pay for them and be done with it. And you can take them out into the festival and watch the band and stuff like that. At the time, that didn't exist. So, in my first summer here, I walked up to this guy, and I'm like, "Hey, is there a place where I can get a 6-pack of beer or something like that?" And he started yelling at me. He's like, "Just buy it from the taco truck or whatever, or the beer truck." And he was pissed off. And that was when I realized that this town has a very clear ambition to be local. You know what I mean? The fact that I was willing that I wanted to go to a gas station or whatever and get a beer, that guy was really pissed off.
Well, not even that, but I think it's also just an association with certain liquor stores. I think they're, at least with when I was doing community organizing for our wonderful audience that will soon explode into the millions. I've worked as a community organizer for about a year, volunteer, and then actually working for pay. I remember we were talking about, we're going to collect petitions and signatures at the liquor store. And you would see people completely hammered. We're talking, they can't even get off the wall hammered.
Where was this at?
Oh, this was in East Cleveland. Right. One of the big liquor stores over there. And we're just collecting signatures like mad.
And East Cleveland is one of the rougher neighborhoods of Cleveland. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, you see these liquor stores and people just go into them and you realize they're coming out and you start to realize that these people, and for many liquor stores around this part, around Cleveland and some of these rougher parts, they exploit people. They really do. They exploit on certain weaknesses and a lack of hope. And it's something that's really kind of sad. And I've been seeing this, I've been just observing it a little bit. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with liquor stores. You can find good liquor sometimes at a local liquor store that may not be in the best neighborhood in the world. But we have to think about it's really exploitation. But in that exploitation, though, comes an opportunity to grow from there. And we've seen the city within my own time. I've been here for about maybe 4 or 5 years, since I came here for undergrad for Case Western. History majors, all my history majors out there, to say, hey. what wound up happening...
I'm not a history major, but can I say hey anyway? Can I say hey anyway?
Sure, why not?
Hey!
There we go. That works. Right. But going through the city, I remember just seeing so many new buildings, so many new things coming into place. Of course, there are issues with the new buildings. It's kicking out some of the old charm of the city from the past, particularly the Cleveland Clinic. That's kind of cold. But it's still better than at times in certain situations where we have businesses that exploit people who really just need that chance to get the leg up that they need.
So I went to this this gas station that was close to Edgewater Live, and they didn't have the beer that I needed, so I kept exploring. I just kept going, right?
Beer crawl, where's my beer? It sounds like Homer.
Well, it's tough when you have an allergy. You have to you have to have specific things.
Did you ever find a bar called Moe's? And they go, what do you want? What do you want, Homer?
I think that was in Springfield.
Well, still. Springfield, Cleveland, same thing.
Is it Springfield, Ohio? I don't think we ever figured out which Springfield The Simpsons were filmed in.
I don't know. They kind of kept it ambiguous.
So I kept driving, right? Mm-hmm. And to be clear, Edgewater is this really nice part of town, up and coming, right?
Yeah.
So I just drove a few more blocks. And I found myself in this little neighborhood where people were arguing in the parking lot, and then people were arguing in the inside the store itself too.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of guys behind the counter who had a baseball bat just in case things got out of hand. Like they were ready to attack,
Oh man, yeah.
And I realized, oh shit. I've just driven a couple of blocks away from Edgewater, and I've gotten into something that I'd rather not be involved in, what I mean? And I can't remember the kid's name. Do you remember the kid that got shot in
Tamir Rice?
Yeah, right. It was right in that neighborhood.
Oh, really?
Right. So it doesn't take long
to
get from a really nice neighborhood in Cleveland to kind of a neighborhood that's kind of shady.
And it really shows that the city is improving, but there's still much progress to be made. But that's why we do stuff like this, because we want to show, even with the scars that Cleveland has, that those scars are beautiful in their own strange way, and that they create a great cohesion in the city. I've never been to a city where I've seen such unity as a people, as a community. It's so clear. Look at the sports teams. They've been losing for decades, of course, except the Bronze Championship and a couple of local teams that have won quite a few things, but not at least not at the super professional level. The Big Four,
right?
But they're so together. Millions of people parading in Cleveland. It's 54 years and decades of struggle in a city that's trying to find its way in a post-industrial era. And it's a fascinating thing to watch. It's really, in a sense, when we think about it, you ever hear about A Tale of Two Cities? The Tale of Two Cities is obviously, it's a very famous book. And I think it's a description of London, I do believe. But let me quickly check, because I do not want to be factually incorrect on our first podcast.
Right.
Let's see. Tale of Two Cities. Actually, I could even give the author. Tale of Two Cities is a historical novel by Charles Dickens set in London and Paris. Okay, so I got one half of it. That's not too bad. Well, I think it's the kind of the contrast of two different cities during the time of the French Revolution. I think on a metaphorical level, I think of Cleveland on that A Tale of Two Cities. It's this tale of a growing city that is rebuilding, refining itself, but also a city that at times there is a sense that it's kind of spiraling in the same direction without much room for growth. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, or it's been both. So it's this fascinating combination that creates this odd sense of unity between the two, because in the end, everyone's just trying to make it to a better place. Where I'm from, and Fred the Mudmonster was born in Baltimore on August 10th, 1996. Born actually at 1:23 p.m. I was a 1-2-3. I was basically Michael Jackson's ABC 1-2-3.
ABC.
Easy as 1, 2, 3.
Dun, dun,
Easy as do, re, mi.
dun, dun, dun,
ABC.
dun,
1,
dun,
2,
dun,
3.
dun, dun, dun.
Baby, you and me. Okay. Now showing that Fred is also not a very good singer. You can see that Caesar and I are not quite opera singers. But alas. Don't do that again.
No. All right.
But where was I going with this again? Give me a tip of the tongue phenomenon. What I was talking about. Saying the comparison. When being from Baltimore, right? Baltimore's a very similar city to Cleveland in terms of it's been down post-industrial era, and what happens is you have a people that are, no offense, I love Baltimore for what it is, and there's plenty of positivity in that city as well, but there's certainly a cloud of negativity that really does pervade throughout the city, and I think many people in Baltimore can observe that. And when I came here to Cleveland the first time, I remember I'd never seen people so happy, almost. Just happy to just
People
go
are
through day to
happier
day.
here.
Yes, they are. Don't get me wrong, we have people who complain.
Yeah.
This ain't a utopia.
I guess I compare it to other places I've been to, you know. I remember moving here, like even before I moved here. Actually, I visited here a few years before I actually moved here.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember driving down the road and seeing this guy that was just like kind of had his head down. And he was just like, he just looked like he was miserable.
Right.
And it's cold for a long time here. And like, there's a lot of rough neighborhoods here. And it's hard. It's a hard life.
It's not
It's
easy.
a hard knock life for us.
See, more musical performances by Caesar.
Right.
As you can see, ruler of Rome and bad singer.
But there's that aspect. Again, I think like you and I talked about a couple of like one of our episodes. I think we're going to do an episode about like our first impressions of Cleveland. That might be one of our first episodes. And you were like, "Hey, if we're going to do that, let's be positive about it, right?"
Yeah.
But aren't we insincere if we only talk about the positive? And
Oh, no. I think unfortunately, we have the phenomenon of a person does not want to. The concept of a train wreck, right? People hate train wrecks, but they love to see them because they're such cataclysmic events where you think, oh my God, these two chunking pieces of metal are colliding in this grand battle and symphony of chaos and destruction that you can't really look away. Unfortunately, I think as humans, we have this proclivity towards just observing things that are more negative and allowing more negative things in our life.
right.
Therefore, when we have those negative impressions, they're more likely to stick with us than the positive. But I remember when I made my first visit here, I too made a visit before coming in for good. This was a college visit at Case Western. I remember this day so clearly. It was cold. It was snowy.
What year? What a month the year?
This was like April.
April. Oh,
Yeah, we're late. So that way people know. Snow does last in April, and it's cold. What happened was my mother and my dad and we were walking out, and I remember I see my mother's hair starting to freeze. I'm thinking, oh boy, this is serious.
because she took a shower.
Right, but still, the hair was starting to freeze up. And
She walked out in the street in their shower hair started.
Right.
Like, yeah.
I mean, I come from a city where we're used to 115, but we ain't used to -2, 10. That's not our thing. Although my mom and dad are more used to it. They're from the north and are basically polar bears. So
Where are they from?
Well, my mother's from New York, and my dad is from a local town near Boston to the south.
Right. Boston's pretty cold.
Boston's cold, and
Like, equally
New York's cold. Yes.
Right.
But for me, being the Maryland boy that I was freezing. But I remember this first impression of meeting like some of the students, and they were so nice. And I remember just looking at the city in the snow, and it was beautiful. I thought, this was perfect. This is a great place to go. This is actually my first choice in terms of Case being the first choice for me going to university. And I got accepted into a couple of other ones. Like, I'm going to start bragging here.
Which ones were they?
Cornell, Rochester.
Case Western's pretty great school, right?
Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
But I got into a couple of other ones. Kind of, those are not significant. I got waitlisted at Grinnell because I'm like, oh, well, if you got into Cornell, we'll shoot.
I feel like Case Western is the premier school in Cleveland.
It is. Well, I think Cleveland State has that title, actually, because it's the most public. I think many Case students, they come here for 4 years and they go, oh, sayonara. I ain't coming back to this trash heap again. Which in due retrospect, if you think it's a trash heap by the time you're done, you've not done due diligence with this city.
Right. It's a difficult city because, like I was talking about with the story about the beer, where I ended up like in a neighborhood that was kind of rough.
Yeah, it's
like
just up and down.
You can go from a really amazing part of town, and then you can walk a couple of blocks and be in a part of town that is not as great pretty quickly.
Yeah, pretty fast.
And I think that's kind of the point of our podcast. Like, I think our podcast is for people who are not from Cleveland, for the most part.
For the most part.
I mean, if people who are from here want to listen, they can listen.
I think they will, because we have all types of crazy info about the city.
Right.
Stuff that you guys don't even know. But get ready for some excitement.
I mean, that's the thing. I'm like, there's people here who are exploring. Like, we are people who are new to the city, relatively.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be like an educational podcast. And this is probably a bad example of what we're going to be like. Because
right.
this is the podcast is like what we're about. As we go along, we're going to just go like learning about stuff as we go. We're going to have like fun, like learning about the city.
Of course.
If we do it correctly.
Correctly? Is there ever a correct way to learn something?
Oh, we're just going to have fun.
Yeah, we're just going to have a good old time.
Right. And we're just going to like go through and learn about aspects of the city. And maybe if we can find people who want to like add stuff to our podcast, like if somebody wants to leave a voicemail or like have a phone interview or just like come hang out with us in general.
Or a love letter. I'll take that.
Right. Send your love letters to Fred the Mud Monster. Mud Monster?
Mud Monster.
Well,
I'll take both.
At whatever.com.
Hello there. I'll take anyone. Because all people are beautiful.
Oh, ladies. Specifically? Or monsters, like sea monsters.
Sea monsters, yeah. That's definitely something that's very exciting. Very exciting. But I will take some airborne monsters as well. They have a different way of doing things, and it can be interesting.
I know this girl named Zika.
Now that we do not like her at the table, let me tell you. We just go and say, "Oh, Zika, what'd you do this time?" "Oh, I infected a bunch of people in Brazil, and then I moved up to Miami." We said, "Listen, we're monsters, but we need to have balance. Now you're just infecting everyone and giving all the little babies small heads. Now they're going to come after us. So no, Zika, we're going to dissociate from you. In other words, you're fired."
If I met a girl named Zika, I'd be like, "Oh, she's so hot." From like some South American like country.
Now here we go. We're going to make assumptions about names.
Zika. I'd name my child Zika if I could. Hey, you want to take a break?
Yes.
All right, later.
Hello, this is Fred, the Monster. Be sure to check out the episode notes for today's show. Go to the photo albums at Facebook.com/The Cleveland Podcast and find the album with the same name as this episode. We'll be sharing photos as well as any additional information that might be relevant to each new show. That way, you'll have something visual to reference as you listen and follow along. If you enjoy the show, be sure to like us and share. See you on the interwebs.
Hey.
Hello. Goodbye.
Don't say goodbye. We're not going anywhere.
No. I just wanted to say it just because.
So, like, I met this dude, like, a few weeks ago, and I was telling him about our idea for a podcast, right?
Right.
And he was like, that's a horrible idea.
Oh.
There was this guy that was from out of town, and he was just, like, trying to figure out what our city was like. And he had just moved here for the first time. And I was talking to him.
Right.
And I'm like, this is what we're about. We're trying to figure out where to live, where to hang out, all those things that guy wanted to know. This is our podcast. You know what I mean?
Right. But my big question is, why do you think it was a horrible idea, even though he asked these questions?
Because, well, there was this other guy.
Other guy.
Who was here long term. Like, he grew up here, and he moved away, and he came back.
Right. So
this guy was like, this is a horrible idea because there's not a lot of transient people in Cleveland. Like, the number of people that you're going to reach is not a great number because a lot of people don't travel here. Like, they don't travel here from other cities, like, you know, like Miami or New York or you know, cities that are more transient. And he's like, your audience is going to be very small. But I don't agree.
They said the Apple Mac wouldn't work, and look what happened. Worth $1 trillion. You know, they said Microsoft would be a failure. You know, here's a fascinating story. I'm going to go on another tangent because I love these. You ever hear about the architect for the Vietnam War Memorial and the story behind it?
No.
So it was actually architecture class, I think at Yale. And it was supposed to be submitted, this architectural design for the Vietnam War Memorial. Everyone submits a design, including the professor. The person who wound up being the architect for the Vietnam War Memorial, she got a C on her project. And quite a few other people got A's. Mm-hmm. But who's the one who got picked? Who's the one who became a world famous architect? She even beat out a design that the professor made. Like, let's be real here. Sometimes one person thinks it won't work, but with some good old magic and the belief of another, suddenly you got something going.
And that's one of the things about Cleveland is there's a little bit of negativity here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of the culture.
A little bit. Don't get me wrong, they're very nice, but at first it's like, ooh, you know, there's a little bit of that.
I remember watching a 30 for 30 ESPN. Mm-hmm. Where, like, some company wanted to move here for the first time. And they decided, like, everybody here is too negative.
Oh, dear.
I remember watching that and thinking, yeah, I can relate to that. I think it kind of comes with the Cleveland curse, which you and I have personally talked about. Like, there's this, like, a downtrodden, dismissive purpose. You know what I mean? And what we need to do is become more positive. It's a big city. You know what I mean? With a lot of different neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And you really have to kind of learn it. You have to, like, you could be here for a while and not understand it.
Right.
Like, you could go from, like, as we were talking about earlier, you could go from one neighborhood to another. You don't know if you're in a good neighborhood or not. All the houses look the same. In a nice neighborhood, the houses are 100 years old. In a bad neighborhood, the houses are 100 years old. And as an outsider, you have to, like, learn that, you know?
Right.
Which one's the nice? Which neighborhood's the nice part and which neighborhood's not?
I certainly think there's a level of exclusion when it comes to the city a little bit. Once you're inside the circle, it's really great, and there's many benefits. But I think that's the same for any exclusionary group, that, except for one that you disagree adamantly with. But I think when we discuss that about the city and the significance of it, I think for so many people, for residents, they lose track. They lose track of the wonders that the city can bring. I mean, after all, for all the people said, "Oh, it's a terrible idea." Did you know? Did you know about this, Caesar? In several magazines, you know what's a top 10 tourist destination in the country right now?
No, what is it?
The city of Cleveland.
Oh, wow.
Who would have thunk? Said person who said that's a terrible idea. That's right. It's personal now. I am very spicy. I am salty and I am sweating. So I have lots of salt in my face. I can tell you I've been lost hundreds of times trying to find anything around here. In fact, one time, you ever been to the Sugar Heights Library? It's a huge library. I remember I'm trying to get to it, and I'm trying to take one of the blue line I think it was supposed to take. I remember...
Sugar Heights is one of those neighborhoods that's kind of nice and kind of...
Yeah, it's mixture, yeah. Particularly around Chagrin. Yeah. Chagrin is where the line really is drawn. But I remember I'm going through and I'm thinking, oh, blue-green line, perfect. And then I take the wrong line, I take the green line. And then I'm all of a sudden thinking, okay. And then it said, drop off around like Lee Van Aken. I get there and I'm in the middle of this white suburbia type of neighborhood. And I am scared. I'm scared, man. Because it's the middle of the night. I'm thinking someone's going to come up and say, what are you doing here? I'm calling the cops. Because I'm covered in mud. Yes, again, this is for real.
This is what Fred the Mud Monster always does. He's always covered in mud.
It was actually really bad. Like, I actually had to throw away my shoes after that. Because the paint, because I was walking along the tracks on the side, just so I didn't get ran over by a train. And it was raining. And I remember there was 2 holes. We're talking about that 3-foot hole in the first episode. There were 2 of them now in this little track. And so my pants were just smudged. We're talking like a Jackson Pollock painting of mud. Yes. It was bad. Even the train driver goes, what did you do? Did you bury a body? I go, yes, 2 of them. I work for the mob. But anyway, listen, back to the main topic.
The status of our opinions, it's going to be difficult because I remember once I was driving from Cleveland Heights I was riding in an Uber from Cleveland Heights to downtown Cleveland. We were going to Winking Lizard. Uh-huh. Turned out there were 2 Winking Lizards downtown, right?
Oh, right. There are. Which one did you go to?
We ended up on the one on Euclid. But initially, I think we entered in the 9th Street.
Oh, the one in the Galleria. Yeah.
Right.
That one's good, though. I like the outdoor setting.
So, my friend and I were just, riding in this Uber downtown.
Right.
And I was talking to her about, East Side used to be so nice. You were talking about it earlier. East Cleveland used to be, one of this major, neighborhoods, in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Up until, the 1950s.
Right.
Long time.
It used to be a very nice neighborhood.
One of the wealthiest in the world.
And her and I were talking about that, and I'm like, the neighborhood's gone downhill, And as we were driving down the road, we got downtown, and the Uber driver seemed kind of pissed off at us. And I'm like, I think this is because we chose the wrong Winking Lizard,
Right.
And my friend was like, no, it's because you've been talking shit about where this guy came from the entire time.
Right.
And I wasn't talking shit. I was just talking about the neighborhood, you know what I mean, and how it's descended. And I think that's probably one of the things that we're going to have to deal with as podcasters is offending people.
Indeed. Like Howard Stern.
And telling the truth at the same time.
Like Howard Stern.
As you've said in the past, it's you want to have a positive outlook.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And I do too. But as from an outsider, if you want to learn about the city, you want to know the truth.
Right. It's definitely kind of when we approach this whole approach it from the perspective that we're coming from as outsiders, we definitely have that. We've not grown up here and seen all the crazy things that have happened. Have we personally seen the Cuyahoga River burn and on fire? No. Have we seen the Tamir Rice incident and lived here when Tamir Rice happened?
No.
What else? When the Browns came back and sucked? No. When the Ravens won the Super Bowl.
Oh, you were there for that.
No. When the Cavs lost the first time to the Spurs. No. There's so much history of just tough times. And I think that does wear down the spirit. But despite that, though, there's a formidable resilience that can be found within the city. Despite the initial outlook of negativity, it's not a permanent mindset. It's only that I think it's in part because as a city, there is this sense of you need to really scrap here to belong. We have the whole Frank Sinatra song of if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Except we're not talking about New York, we're talking about Cleveland here.
If I can make it in Cleveland, I can make it
anywhere.
Anywhere.
It's up to you, Cleveland. But it's tricky because we don't perhaps get that full history. We don't get the Huff riots. We don't get those things where we've seen our own personal communities get torn asunder. But what we can do, though, is as outsiders provide something where we can say that we have the right to belong here as Clevelanders. And I think in that moment, we gain that respect and we change the conversation. We change the conversation associated with neighborhoods because all the time you hear people say, oh, man, don't go down Huff, or don't go down East Cleveland, or don't go to this neighborhood, that neighborhood. I say, well, shoot, don't go to Shaker Heights. Don't go to Aurora because they have dogs everywhere. I think it's ridiculous to say, well, you should really avoid this city. Yes, you should be cautious and have cautions. And
you shouldn't any other major city.
Right. You can't just go around looking at your phone like, well, I wonder if someone's going to rob me today. I mean, it wasn't real. If someone had to just rob you for some cash, and you're looking down at your phone in the middle of a tough neighborhood, like near the near the Metro Park Zoo, they're gonna rob you on the spot. Who wouldn't? I would.
Don't do it. Don't
give me your iPhone,
Fred.
Give me your iPhone, Caesar.
Oh my God!
But it's
Fred just took my iPhone. That's
right. I'm going to make a call on it. But the point is, though...
Who you calling?
I don't know. Calling my mother. So tell her I'm a bad boy. I'm in a bad mud muster.
I just stole Caesar's phone.
But I think we often have this too much... I think this is a very human thing, though, too. Like, you can see this in New York. You see in Chicago. I think there's a natural... I think... the way we have to rephrase it is there's not like a natural sense of negativity about the world. It's a natural negativity towards the city itself. And I think there's a lot of that within many cities that we can find. Right. Because I'll say that I have had my boots on many grounds of many lands. In fact, I've spent over almost a year and a half of my life outside the United States.
Yeah.
Which is a fun fact. I didn't think you do that.
Year and a half?
About a year and a half. Like a year and 3 months. So
a little bit like a month at a time, or like...
Yeah, like a month at a time.
Yeah.
Because our family, we would save up, those little things and just like go out, to the little country. Like we wouldn't spend too much. We would just save it onto a trip because it would just be a worthwhile, eye-opening experience. And when you go to all these different cities, the first thing you always hear is this like self-deprecating humor towards the city itself of any type. I remember being in Cape Town and, our tour driver, which I'll not mimic the accent because it's too hard and just doesn't make sense and it's a bad idea.
Right.
He says, well, Cape Town's so beautiful, but at the same time, it's a place where dreams have been crushed. Like I won't say who. There was a story about people getting their houses bulldozed over during the apartheid period in that town, and just for no reason, just because they could build like bigger estates for certain white landowners and can build malls and these bulldoze over these black neighborhoods in Cape Town. But even though that happened, and the driver said that it's still a beautiful city. and I don't know where else I would go. But it's always like there's those who reside here. The notion is, I think, when we bring up negativity, it's the perspective. It's bringing a reality check onto someone's perception of a city. Like when people say, "Oh, New York's so amazing, so fantastic," blah 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 blah, and you say, "Well, it's expensive. It's hard to live here."
No city is that great.
Right. So no city is like so good that there's no significant cons. And when people kind of go with this more negative outlook, it's a more realistic one. But at times, it's that pragmatism is just unnecessary.
Every city has good and bad.
Right. So what we're really trying to do is not just come from the perspective of we're trying to say, well, here's some positive things, and then we're going to just bring it all down to shreds and say these bad things about the city and critique it in this very much brutal fashion.
Affordability in Cleveland is
It's fantastic.
incredible.
What I think first of all, that's a great benefit. See, but at the same time, you might have you have the river burning, right? Like our river doesn't really have. It's not really the healthiest river.
Hasn't burned for a while.
Well, I mean, yeah, good 50 years, but still,
Right.
It could burn again. But the point,
But it's there are still problems.
right. But so when people to kind of bring, I lived in Cleveland where the river burned. It's like it's that perception of using self-deprecating humor to relate to another person from a different city. Because I remember that. So I think when we kind of go down that route, I think our job as podcasters is not necessarily to get rid of that type of negative perception of the city or like the negative approach, but instead just project and convey what the positives and some of the negatives of a city are in the most objective way possible,
Right.
as a means to create a complete clear lens that can be observed by a third party. We don't want people to be influenced by those who say, well, you shouldn't live here because we sucked all these years in Browns football. We suck.
When I first moved here, every time I drove across the Valley View Bridge, which is Interstate 480, I'd look over the side and I'd be like, wow, this is so amazing. Every day. You know what? I remember after a year of living here, it was like, I wish these cars would drive faster. Up this bridge.
Right, yeah.
I stopped seeing what new people see. But if you grew up here,
That must be so normal.
it's so normal. You probably wouldn't even think anything of it.
Well, right, but it's finding the beauty in the ordinary. And actually, I have a story about that as well.
Yeah.
And I would take a lot of walks downtown. I was a very exploratory guy, finding different things to do, just wanting to observe the city. One of the things I kind of do in my spare time from time to time is photography. And so this is not serious. We're talking an iPhone camera. We're talking, I'm no better than a selfie person, really. It's just that, except I don't take pictures of my face because the mud muster cannot be revealed. Besides, I'm covered in my face is covered in mud. It just looks bad.
It's always muddy.
It looks like I look like Muck from the Pokemon Muck. I look like that. So for those who don't know what that is, look it up and you'll see what I look like. But anyway,
Just look at a Google mud.
you're right, Google mud. But I remember we're going downtown. Well, I'm going downtown. This is about 6, 7 p.m. Actually, 6:21 p.m. Because iPhone can keep track of when I took the photo. Now I remember I saw the sunset kind of setting on Public Square, right? And I see these buildings, and these buildings are not pretty buildings. These are internationalistic style. We're talking bland, a little bit of brick, but pretty much it's just normal buildings. But the way the light shone on these buildings would create this glow, this incredible glow that would invoke this tremendous sense of beauty from these buildings that are dirty and covered in grime and soot or soot. Thank you. College degree here. I can't pronounce soot.
Suit.
Oh, no, don't confuse me now.
Soot.
But the point is, I see the beautiful blue sky, and I see the sun setting with the light shining on these buildings, and I take this picture, and it's got one of everything. It's got like a lamp post in here. You can see the antenna for one of the buildings. You can actually see some of the construction work signs, but just looking at the buildings, though, you'll see something that's really beautiful. And I'd like to show Caesar my artistic venture. Oh boy, this is a little bit...
Oh man, we're across the room from each other.
We are, but that's why we can slide things. And that didn't work. Oh God. The mud monster has failed. I have... At 2 phone. Okay. Like, do you see what I mean?
It's beautiful. Oh, shit. All right. It's beautiful.
I mean, it's really just something astounding. It's just some regular old buildings, office buildings people go to work in, and I think for a regular person that lives there, they go, oh, it's just another day on the job. But if we take time to just observe the small things, and I think this is what made us really inspired by the podcast. It's not like the big things of Cleveland, because those are obvious. But it's those small little moments that we've had as people who have lived in the city that have made us really fall in love with it. It's those little moments of just where where nature seems to, or nature or human-made adventure makes Cleveland unbelievably gorgeous. It has this allure that is truly unique to the city. I can't really find I couldn't find that type of light in any other city in America. Well, I could try, but it wouldn't be easy. That type of photo with the right angle, you just can't find that type of beauty everywhere. Hey, Cleveland, if you have any feedback, thoughts, or ideas about our podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at theclevelandpodcast@gmail.com or hit us up at facebook.com/theclevelandpodcast. Enjoy the rest of the show.
And this is the segment where we talk less about the podcast itself
and more about us, so we can show that we have incredible egos.
And there will never be another Cleveland podcast that is so egocentric.
Oh, yes. I'm staring at my naked chest as we speak.
Put a shirt on.
My muscles are too glorious.
Put a shirt on, Fred.
I am a Greek god. Call me Apollo. I am the Adonis. My name's Fred. Fred the Mudbuster. I'm 6'8", 550 pounds. My fat extends everywhere because it's mud, so I do leave a lot of a mess. Originally came from around the swamps of D.C. in the Baltimore area, which is very, very swampy, very stinky, very smelly, lots of weird things. And from there, the young mudmuster began to grow and develop. He once was a very skinny one. And then he ate all the food, and then he ate like 5 children, and then he became big. From then on, it began an exploration into the world of academics, as his parents were very smart mudmusters, one carrying a PhD, the other one almost finishing their PhD. And therefore, I could never lie to them because they were too smart for me. Therefore, anything about report cards, even though I do generally pretty well, they'd go, "Oh no, show it. We know you're lying."
How many children did you eat?
Oh, children? I'm going to reference anime quote here so we can get anime fans involved here. As the great Dio Brando once said, "Do you keep track of the amount of bread that you eat?" It's in reference to Dio. Dio Brando's a vampire, and they're like, right. "Oh, well, how much blood have you had? How many people have you killed?" It's like, do you keep track of how much bread you've eaten? Like how many loaves of bread? So basically, I have eaten many a child, and they're very tasty. Some taste like ice cream. Some taste like iron. Some taste like ostrich, dry and tender, and doesn't work for me. I'm more of a sloppy Joe type of mud muster.
Are you a foodie?
Oh yes, all types of mud. The cow mud, mud with dog residue, anything with related to mud. I'm really good at. So therefore, anything that looks like chocolate ice cream will always go down very, very easily.
I'm not a foodie.
You're not?
I'm not.
Come on, you're Caesar salad. Get out of here.
I only like Caesar salads.
Oh wow, look at you, Mr. Healthy. You look like a salad rather than you ate a salad. You're big in a bowl.
I think like if we're gonna do like restaurant episodes, we're gonna need help, right?
Oh yeah, because we're gonna order too much. Then I'm gonna order with one kid, and then we're kicked out.
Oh, you're gonna eat a kid. You're gonna eat the owner's kid.
Oh yeah, I mean they're tasty. What can I do?
I really think that's part of like our appeal.
What, eating children?
No. Maybe.
Oh, maybe. Oh, we're going downhill from
Like
here.
if people like podcasts about eating children,
Well, unfortunately, there's to venture into disgusting.
we may have found our niche.
Well, not that, but there's like a fetish. Not eating children, but like eating like flesh. It's like a turn on.
Like that German dude.
Yeah, basic. Well, no, his was different. The guy, well, do we really want to go into detail? Well, he chopped up the guy. He chopped up his lover, and then he preserved the stuff in the fridge. His was different. His was this was different. Like there's a cannibal, which they eat the person, but it doesn't mean like they get pleasure out of it. They just want to eat them. Whereas this type of fetish is like they like to either watch someone being devoured or want themselves to be devoured. So the man who got chopped up had that fetish of being devoured.
He wanted to be eaten.
Right.
The German dude.
Not the one that got killed, yeah.
Yeah.
The German killer was just like interested in a lover, and then he was like, well, I'm a cannibal, so might as well eat him.
I feel like Germans are like way into weird shit.
Oh, come on. Just because we're into weird colors does not mean...
Are you German?
You mostly.
Really?
German.
I am kind of too.
I'm a German heritage. I'm basically a European combination of everything.
What's that fro? You got a fro.
I do. Well, that comes from... well, we're trying to figure that out, actually. As we've learned, is all of our heritage might be a lie because we thought we were mostly Italian. Now we're just Spanish and Greek that were in Italy.
Spanish and Greek and German.
Well, Spanish, Greek, French, Luxembourgian, maybe some Dutch. I think we had a couple of Russians in there. We even supposedly had a Japanese relative.
Like everybody made it together.
Yes,
and they formed you.
Oh God, yeah. Well, our family history is bizarre. We have a lot of legends, actually.
Yeah.
Like for instance, this is true. One of my relatives long ago was a guard to the Pope. Like was one of the Swiss guard popes.
Yeah.
One of the Swiss guards. He would wear the fancy regalia and then would protect the Pope. And then another person on the other side was best friends with Richard Wagner, the famous German opera composer. Yeah. And then actually, my cousin, like a couple down the line removed, is Chick Corea, a multi-Grammy winning jazz musician. I think he's won more than 10 Grammys. Like he's been nominated for like 50. The guy's been nominated for everything. And and here's our cousin. He doesn't even associate with us.
Have you tried emailing him?
No.
And seeing if he answers.
Well, my Grammy thinks he's a weirdo, so I want to respect my Grammy's wishes. Then supposedly, we're even even our name has a French origin because well, I can't really explain it, but the family name, the actual family name, because we're actually not Fred the Mudmonster and Caesar. I'm afraid to tell everyone that we don't eat children. So you're not most of the time.
Are you telling me you're not a mud monster?
Well, I am covered in mud, but no. I'm like a mud mustard light, But the biological name, last name, supposedly, despite the fact it's quite German in its pronunciation and spelling, is supposedly French, and it means supposedly in ancient French it means the house of God. because we used to guard the French kings. And we even have a coat of arms. Supposedly we were even related to monarchies, like a couple of them. We have a lot of legends in the family.
Yeah.
That probably are not true. Maybe they are. But one really cool thing, though, is in our heritage, we have some people from Alsace-Lorraine, which is France, and parts of Germany, but mostly France. And our relatives from that side of the country, I guess like I mentioned this name, the Goosenecks, and turns out that name is found in the family history of Barack Obama, because Barack Obama's half white, half black.
Yeah.
And so that name is found in the same region, same spelling, same region, likely the same town. So we're thinking that we were the reject cousins of the Goosenecks that made Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of cool. So we might be, I might be Obama's cousin.
Obama is part Gooseneck?
Gooseneck, but I might be his cousin. So that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Then that also means I'm related to like Harry Truman, George Bush.
So like Obama's related to Truman and
mm-hmm. Dick Cheney. Yeah, George Bush and Dick Cheney are related. Kind of really odd pairing, but it works, I guess. But technically, if it all turns out true, I'd be related to.
How did you find this out?
Oh, well, because the family history for Obama is fairly obvious. And he goes, we're related to the Goosenecks in Alsace-Lorraine. And then we knew about the Goosenecks because of a couple lines down, the French side of the family. And so now we go, oh, shoot, like, it's the same connection, same region. Like, that's a little bit nutty.
So what are your kind of, like, political leniencies?
Oh, it's where any candidate puts their face in the mud. Yeah, well...
I mean, you're a little more far left than I am, right?
Yeah, well, I was once in a radical communist group. Two of them, actually. It was definitely a formative experience, but wouldn't do it again. It was kind of odd, and it was a definitely tough time. And I'm not saying it was like we're not talking Antifa, This was like a step before Antifa.
Yeah.
So, but I actually knew people who were in Antifa at one point. And, and they were like, they get arrested for arrest for assault on the cop and just like stuff like that. And I'm like, listen, they do them. I'm proud that they're fighting the good fight, trying to like take on the system. That's not easy. But I'm like, oh man, like, listen, I'd rather just sleep in than attend morning protests and not get into serious trouble. And I've just found other ways to be someone who's effective at being politically active.
Right.
I became the community organizer, and then I met all types of other people from there. So all types of people with various different backgrounds and just about everything.
I'm not a very political person, though.
Right.
I want people to be good people.
And I agree with that, too. Like, I 100% can respect a conversation with someone on the far right.
Right.
Because it's your opinion, and I respect you as an individual. There's no need to go, oh, man, you're subhuman. It just seems ridiculous. Like, we have, like, opinions of, well, if you believe X, Y, and Z, then that's really ridiculous. But you have to respect that person's space in order to create an effective conversation that allows them to go, I'll look that up about what they said. Maybe that is true. Who knows? Right. And so all of a sudden you begin that role of, you're never going to make them, like, 100% lean left. That's a pretty big, like, change. But you can at least go and say, allow the person to be more informed of the other perspective and allows them to have a more balanced opinion on a certain matter. But I'm very much someone who's accepting. A lot of my crushes have been different races of different types, and I have friends from every corner of the world at this point. It's a fascinating little collection of people who've become my friends. It's like you see these long lists of bizarre names and bizarre places, people all over the world. You have people from Thailand and people from China and the Philippines and Russia and Italy. They're all people who I became friends with. That's just a small example like people from South Africa, just different things, different people. And I think, that's one of the that's one of the interesting things about Cleveland is that there's a developing immigration scene here in some regard. Like, if you ever heard of like Global Cleveland, like, they take in like immigrants and they kind of put them here in order to get them a head start.
Right.
And so you kind of see that, Cleveland's making some efforts to be more diversified. But it's going to take a lot of effort, and it's also going to be about economic accessibility. Can you successfully mix more wealthy houses with more low income, and how can you make it a cohesive community?
I've always felt like, as a person who didn't really grow up around a lot of diversity, kind of like you said, it's like, you meet a cute girl from another country, man, and it's like it breaks down your walls,
It does. I think it's like different for me though, because like, it's weird to say this, but I knew that I was the majority in the country because of my white skin color.
Yeah.
But it was a culture shock to go here, and it was majority white. And I go, what do I do? Like, like I was actually uncomfortable, like around other whites. It was a very strange feeling. Like, I was like, huh? Like, I just didn't know what to do at first. I kind of got more comfortable with it, and I was like, oh, well, I'm a very quick to adapt sociable person, but being from Baltimore and being raised in public schools my entire life, where the majority of the time I was not a white person was not the majority in the school, it was definitely a shock to see a dramatic decrease in the presence of African Americans in the city. Although the community still plays a huge role in the politics of Cleveland, as indicated by the political seating of the councilman and the mayor.
And race is a matter here in Cleveland, right?
Oh my! Well, I mean, it's one of the most segregated cities in the country.
Right.
Red line. If you ever read about the red line stuff, it's pretty much housing authorities pushing people around and putting certain houses in certain neighborhoods and causing all types of mayhem.
I talked to you like last week about something that was like Cleveland is the most segregated city in the United States, and it depends on which website you look at.
And I think Baltimore is fairly up there as well.
Right.
I think the difference is that with Cleveland, it's really stark. You can cross a street. I mean, there are streets that you cross it, and it's night and day. Neighborhoods like majority white, majority black, and suddenly and unfortunately they do carry certain economic conditions.
Right.
And even though that we've seen dozens of times of successful African Americans making it into those white neighborhoods, and by the way, any person's capable of anything is equally capable. No one's inherently inferior.
Right.
But the way society is constructed makes it a big, it's like a race. You ever see like one of those races with not a race, but like more like the pole jump? You ever see like those pole vaults at the Olympics?
Yeah.
Except for so many people in the community that are minorities, particularly African Americans. I mean, the pole is set 4 meters high, whereas for the white community, we're starting off at 2. It's a big difference. It's a world of difference. And with the 4 meter, you're more likely to fail, and it's going to look bad. But you crossed that 2 meter. Oh, you've done good now. So I think it's just those barriers that exist, and to tackle them. And I think, believe it or not, through our podcast, I think we can do a little bit of that.
Right.
We're not going to be the Dr. Martin Luther Kings of the world, and look at us, we ain't going to be. But we can certainly try and make an impact in terms of informing our audience of what is going on and being truthful, but also, showing how, because of the unity our city has at times and the beauty of it, it can eventually overcome that haunting history.
There's nowhere to go but up.
There is nowhere, and that's why you kind of love the city, because those little moments of improvement, you gotta love it, because people just don't give up here.
And like you and I moved to here around the same time. There were some specific moments that were really fascinating, which you don't like the Republican National Convention. the World
But that
Series.
was fascinating to watch.
It was fun. It was like a good time for the city.
Yeah, of course, naturally.
And then World Series and then the NBA championship all happened like in the same year.
Which is nuts.
Yeah. And then like we're going to have the
All-Star game, right?
All-Star game and then like the NCAA like first round or something like that. I don't even know. So it's not over.
Oh no, it's far from over. In fact, fun fact about a little bit about the Cleveland stuff. Related a little bit to the sports. In 1996, and the All-Star game in Cleveland is where the top 50 players were introduced. The top 50 players of all time, and they got little jackets, and it's a big old collection of players. They even included Shaquille O'Neal, who was only 4 or 5 years into his career by then. They made a bold claim to make him top 50. Well, they're right, but that was bold. But that's the fun fact. Cleveland's a place for that.
Right.
Top 50. It's like official. It was here. Do those guys going to be making their living in Cleveland? No, but at least we can say we had that special moment. It just kind of, it's those little moments that kind of give the city new fire that lasts for years, well beyond its expected expiration date, and suddenly it becomes more momentum, more strength, and I feel like we're kind of reaching towards that point in some regard.
Right. So we're two people who are not from the city, and people might disagree with our opinions.
But who cares?
And people are welcome to share dissenting opinions. And people can do that on our Facebook page.
Where, of course, Facebook is always so civil.
Try to be civil. I think some keywords are like butthurt or snowflake. If you use those words, I'm probably just going to like ignore.
Yeah, right.
Right?
It's like, kicked out.
I'm not even going to kick them out. I'm just going to listen. They can say whatever they want to say.
Yeah, right.
But I think that we could also use opinions from people in our podcast. Like if somebody comments on our podcast.
Right, yeah.
We can use that inside our podcast,
Right.
As long as it's like intelligent and civil.
Right.
And, maybe we could find some great people online.
Like Alex Jones. You can see his face. Well, I think, my favorite is always, what was it? They put the chemicals in the water to turn the freaking frogs gay. You go, why? What made you think about this? Like, we got Chemical Orange, which was a disaster and a horrific crime against humanity, but the frogs? Really? No.
Gay frogs?
Yeah, it was like he's like, I don't want chemicals in the water because it's supposed to be dangerous, and so I think they're like, oh man, frogs, and then he's like, serious crap. You're like, this guy is mental.
Right. Don't email us with all caps.
Yeah, don't email us all caps.
Don't talk about gay frogs.
Yeah, well, I mean, we accept anyone of any sexuality, of the various different people of LGBTQ+, but we just don't like the idea of bringing up gay frogs in the context of Alex Jones.
As we move forward, we're going to evolve. For now, it's just you and me, and we'll be talking about Cleveland stuff.
Right.
But as we move forward, we'll probably try to bring some guests in the mix.
We'll go from chemicals in the water and frogs to actual content like housing prices in Cleveland.
In the future, we're going to be more about Cleveland-specific topics.
Yeah, because, we just want to make sure that people have a nice, thorough introduction of us. Because after all, we can't believe that they put water in Cleveland to turn us into podcasters.
That's it. We're out.
All righty.
All right.